What's up, people? It's been a little while since I've streamed. I haven't streamed in probably, wow, it feels like a month. I don't know. I was doing it there for a while every night. I don't like D-Live. I can't do it on YouTube. I keep getting banned, like instant banned. I've been thrown off of Twitter 18 times. I've been thrown off of YouTube like 7 times. I haven't been thrown off D-Live yet, but that's because I'm literally a nobody here. Nobody shows up and watches me. I'm like probably the only one that watches myself. I'll record this and put it on YouTube later tonight or tomorrow. Long story short, a guy showed up in my Discord and told me that this is the definitive proof of systemic racism in America. That's what he said. He said, this is the definitive proof of systemic racism in America. And I went to check the video out, check the comments out, and I was going to watch, the intro of the video, but it jumped right into the video. So I've done seen like the first 10 seconds of the video and couldn't help but see it because it's no intro or nothing. It just jumps right in with the propaganda. Welcome, Buckshot433 in the chat. I'm loving the... Going old school with the Pepe here, getting beaten in the head, it looks like, by some kind of wildcat. I don't know, I'm not a feline person. I like canids. Anyways, this I was told, like I said, I'm repeating myself again for the sake of repeating myself, I assume. The definitive proof of white privilege, systemic racism. Systemic racism. Systemic racism, white privilege, oppression. I get them all confused. Because they're all so nebulous, and they're all so convoluted, and they're also God of the gaps. It's like we figure out why X exists in the black community, or why Y exists in the black community, why Z exists in the black community, and then they just move it to something more nebulous and more harder to define, tougher to wrap your head around, or your hands around, I guess. And say, no, this is it. This is the systemic racism. So this is explaining systemic racism. Let me make sure the volume's up on this. I'm hoping it plays through. If it doesn't, scream at me in the chat, the few people who are here.
This is Jamal. Jamal is a boy who lives in a poor neighborhood. He has a friend named...
Hold on. Jamal, are you even serious right now? And why is this a alt-right person making this video and this is a psyop for leftists? Why is this so dark on Jamal's side? Buckshot says he saw this. I hate to show it to you again, then you might want to leave, but I just can't get over Jamal. And look at the state of Jamal's house. How does poverty have anything to do with this? Why are your windows broken and boarded up with boards if you're just poor? You don't have to break your windows if you're poor. You don't have to. I grew up poorer than any of these black people. I grew up in mountain hollers. I don't know if people grasp the poverty in mountain hollers, where people literally have outhouses and mountain hollers. They're off the grid completely. Government doesn't come in. Uncle Charlie isn't building new housing projects. People go to scrap yards and junk yards to get scrap wood and metal and build their own houses. Stuff grass into a sack and that's their mattress. Stitch their own children's clothes together. I don't know why they continue to have children, but people do when they're in poverty and lower IQ continue to have children. I think as poor as I was growing up, maybe like one time a window was busted out in my house. And that's because my brothers and me are just stupid in the backyard thinking we're Nolan Ryan with the baseball. Let's continue here.
Kevin, who lives in a wealthy neighborhood. All of Jamal's neighbors are African American, and all of Kevin's neighbors are white.
So basically they're telling us every black person ever is poor and lives in a poor ghetto with nothing but black people around. Every white person ever is wealthy and lives in a upscale cul-de-sac with nothing but white people around. So this is what we're learning here. Welcome, Wojak Woes. We're learning a lot here.
Because Jamal's school district is mostly funded by property taxes, his school is not very well funded.
Again, why are the windows broken out in the school? Being poor doesn't mean, look, you can go spend $5 on a glass or $50 on the glass. If the glass is just sitting there, what happens? Do are birds retarded in poor neighborhoods and fly through the windows? I don't get, hold on, I'll get back to this in a minute. My dog's walking out in the kitchen. I thought she wants to go out back. She's just getting her something to drink. She's got something wrong with her paws and she limps around like an old decrepit man.
Classrooms are overcrowded, his teachers are underpaid, and he doesn't have access to high-quality tutors or extracurricular activities.
You know what? Over in Asia, where they're like whizzes at math, you shove 50 kids. This is no lie. I used to watch these specials all the time when I was, I don't want to say too young, probably like in my early 20s, still college. I used to watch these specials all the time because you only got like the 4 channels. And these specials all the time would come on real late at night. They wouldn't be infomercials. They'd be these shows about these kids over in the third world. 50 kids in a hut in Asia somewhere. Their drinking water looks like crap. It's got stuff floating around in it. It's brown. And they're learning on an abacus. They're learning mathematics on an abacus. And these kids are brilliant. And when they grow up, their dream is, I want to come to America. I come into America. They just wanted to come here, and they learned and they busted their butts to come to America to get to a better life. And then you have black people here who, like he just mentioned, they don't pay property taxes. If they're in Section 8 housing, they don't pay property taxes. So white people in Kevin's neighborhood are funding their schools in the first place. But because their schools aren't as funded, they can't even have windows intact. What does Kevin's school look like?
School district is also funded by property taxes.
Not one broken window. And they pay more property taxes. Well, if we're talking about just the tax rate, well, then raise the tax rate on the black neighborhood. Give them something else to fuss about, I reckon. You know, the schools are matched, generally speaking, by federal funds, but then you end up having to get more local funds and more federal funds that are given to these poorer schools so that they can even remain operational because their parents they don't own property to pay property taxes. 42% of black people in America, 42% live in Section 8 housing and don't pay property taxes. And are still having an average of like what is it, 3.2 children apiece, and shoving them into public schools that are nothing but daycare centers. It's crazy. Brian, you and Halsey need to have a show about this topic, says Bojack Woes. I want him to bring me on the Jared Taylor episode, but he won't.
His school is very well funded. His classrooms are never crowded, his teachers are very well paid, and he has access to high-quality tutors.
2 things here. Teachers are all the time, even in rich white neighborhoods, complaining that they're underpaid. SAT prep. Well, you know, I guess when you get 240 free SAT points in the other school, you don't need the prep, maybe? Why isn't the teacher teaching SAT prep in the black schools? Why are they making black people seem so nothing? They're making black people seem like they're not even human beings with their own agency. Black people cannot even keep from busting their own windows out of their homes and their schools. They got random pieces of wood nailed up on their houses. How does this white liberal, probably Jewish progressive, how does he view black people? Yet I'm the problem.
And lots of extracurricular activities. Kevin and Jamal.
Black schools don't have sports. How many scholarships are given to white people? Maybe hockey? Maybe soccer? Basketball, football, baseball? They're all going to blacks and Dominican kids who get noticed by college recruits because their schools have athletic programs. This is just, where does this person live? Where does this person live who made this video? Oh my God, I'm 37 seconds into it and already 15 minutes worth of rubbish.
Live only a few streets away from each other. So how come they're growing up in such different worlds?
Well, first of all, they're not growing up in these different worlds. This is your fantasy. This is your fantasy here. Look at this. They don't even have water. There's no sun here. There's no sun in this neighborhood. Is this supposed to be expressing the smog? Well, if they only live 2 streets apart, then why isn't there smog here? Do white people have a magic force field? Smog be out? Gandalf the Grey lives in their backyard and keeps smog out? What? I don't understand what's going here. What's going on? What is happening? White people have 2 clouds. Black people only have 1 cloud. All of this is intentional to literally be propaganda.
Such different opportunities for success. The answer has to do with America's history of systemic racism.
History has nothing to do with the present when we're talking about this kind of stuff. It seriously doesn't. It seriously doesn't. You know that the vast majority of people with wealth in America, that at some point they had to create that wealth. You know, you think of rich, powerful families. Somebody like the Kennedys or the Rockefellers or something. At some point in time, they were born, because we all were at one point, because there was no conceptualization of economics like we conceptualize them and practice them today. At some point in time, all of these people started from rock bottom. And I know they want to say, well, slavery and this and that. But I mean, come on, really? So, white people are still spending that cotton money? Is that really it?
To understand it better, let's look at what life was like for Kevin and Jamal's grandparents. Decades after the Civil War, many government agencies started to draw maps dividing cities into sections that were either desirable or undesirable for investment. This practice was...
it's not so simple as that. They still do it to... See, me personally, I don't draw too much of a distinction between redlining and gerrymandering insofar as it's the same people who are segmenting these things off. It's not like redlining is basically the practice by which, like, say, lending institutions don't lend to you because, or don't lend to a demographic because they are too high risk, or a grocery store is not going to move in your neighborhood because they're not going to profit. You know, there's a couple things I want to say about this. I'm stopping this in every place it seems like every 2 words. But there's just so much already that's wrong about this. 1 minute in, and it's just already so much propaganda. You know, the redlining, it wasn't done like, oh, we're going to put blacks here and then not give them anything. And you know how we know this? Because unlike all of these people, I've lived in poor white neighborhoods. You know, when I go up on the mountain to visit my brother, or when I used to go up on the mountain to visit my friends, I live more in the valley. But you know, you go up on the mountain, as the mountain goes and goes and goes up. It's not free real estate, it's extra real estate. For black people, it's free real estate. Is what they get. This is just extra, you know, building up. It's extra places to live up on the mountains and stuff. And a lot of hollers and stuff. You know, you're like 25, 30 minutes away from a grocery store. You're 30 miles away from the nearest hospital, even the nearest clinic. You're like 45 minutes out from schools. You're so far away, removed from everything. No, they don't put grocery stores by you. No, lending institutions are going to say you're high risk. Do you know why people in mountain hollers don't have plots of beautiful land with houses built? Because they're not going to go to a mortgage lender or an investment firm that wants to invest in residential properties and say, take a chance on us. No. This is the thing they leave out to disprove what they're saying, is that this isn't something that's black specific. They want to make these things black specific when they're literally not black specific. They have to know this, right? The Appalachia is something like 270,000 square miles smack dab in the Middle East. if you will, of America. Seriously. We're landlocked, but we're still like close to the East Coast, and it's basically from the midpoint down, till you get to the to Low Country, down around Georgia and that is the Appalachia region, Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, some I believe of Georgia, maybe throwing some of the Carolinas in there, the western end of the Carolinas, or some redlined places. I hung out with a boy in ninth grade named Kenny. And he's like, hey, man, you want to come to my house? My house is awesome. We can spend the night, man, and it's haunted. It's an old Civil War place. And I was like, yeah, I'm in ninth grade. I'm 14 years old. I ain't got no car to drive out there. So I went home, Mom, you take me to Kenny's house? So where is it? And he wrote it down for me on something. She said, well, I can't drive all the way out here. So I begged and begged and begged. Yeah. It was an hour and 15 minutes driving to his house. Now, I want y'all to understand why I'm saying this. He lived an hour and 15 minutes away. Something crazy like 50 miles away from the school he went to. That was the only school available in the district where he went to. But redlining, right? Why don't they build schools closer to these people? He lived in a pretty big community. It was a town. It was literally a legitimate town. But he had to go all the way into the county. He was in they call it's an unincorporated town. It's a town that's not incorporated into the county. And that's because of the people who draw the districts. It's not because the citizens who live there. I'm sure they'd love to draw themselves into the county and then have a grocery store built out there. They had to go even further for the grocery store. Like 3 miles away from the school was the grocery store. So, he's got to take this short bus in, just short bus, for like 17 kids that live out there by him that went to the school. And they're leaving for school at like 6 in the morning. Redlining only happens in black communities, so am I right? Let me try to watch a little bit more of this so I'm not just stopping it literally every 5 seconds.
Called redlining, and it usually blocked off entire black neighborhoods from access to private and public investment. Banks and insurance companies used these maps for decades to deny black people loans and other services based purely on race. Historically,
it's not based purely on race. It's based purely on risk. If you want to see, this is the thing. If something is true, you don't have to lie about it. That's not Stefan Molyneux pretending to be a philosopher. That's not Halsey English spurging out on the JQ with some wisdom against the alt-right. That's just something that is axiomatically understandable by anyone who has a brain capable of functioning above the level of Somali. Is that if something is true, you don't have to lie about it. You can make us question these practices by telling the truth. That if race at all had anything to do with it, and I'm not saying that race had nothing to do with it, what they took into account more. Look, because you can't have it both ways. You can't say banks and capitalism, because this is all Marxist propaganda. Let's get that out of the way. You can't say banks and capitalism are so greedy that they'll take advantage of everybody. As long as they can make a buck off of you, they're going to take advantage of you, and they don't care if you're poor, they don't care if you suffer. It's what they said at the housing crisis of 2008, remember? That the predatory mortgage lenders who did loan to everybody despite risk, just so in hopes that they can make some money and make their shareholders money and drive their stock prices up, etc., to create this housing bubble. And I'm no economics expert there, so a lot of people can get at me and tell me if I'm getting things a little wrong here, but I think I got the general gist of it here, is that they viewed these people as high risk. Do you think if blacks had jobs and money, the means to pay it back, that they would say, nah, you're black, we're still part of the Ku Klux Klan? Or do you think they'd say, oh, here's some black people, let me take their monies? You know it would be the second. Everybody knows it would be the second. The cuckold making this, who just cleaned his wife's vagina out for her boyfriend last night, knows that it would be the second thing. It would objectively be the second thing. They chose not to lend to them because of the risk involved in it. The same reason, again, and I'll bring it up, the same reason that they don't loan to the people in the Appalachia. They're not property owners either. The hoops my parents had to go to. Well, you know how many times I'm talking to my friends when I'm a kid? And, you know, we all lived kind of like nearby, and I'd be walking up the street, and Mom, Brian, come here. I'm like, oh, hell. Oh, Brian got in trouble. Nah, man. My mom just wants to talk to me. And I'd come out all sad-faced and kicking rocks with my head down. What's wrong? We're about to lose the house again. The hoops they had to jump through to keep their stuff. When if you ask these people, somebody just showed up with a cape in the Superman suit, except it had a W on the chest for white privilege. Dun, 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 showed up and just bailed people out. This is the most insane view of life that I can imagine.
Speaking, owning a home and getting a college education is the easiest way for an American family to build wealth. But when Jamal's grandparents wanted to buy a house, the banks refused because they lived in a neighborhood that was redlined. So Jamal's grandparents were not able to buy a home, and because colleges could prevent them from attending through legal segregation, their options for higher education were really scarce.
But look, you know, you got kids, especially where I grew up in Virginia, you got kids that really get tired of the mountain. You know, I mean, I write songs like Cool Mountain Air Might Do You Good because I love my culture. I love where I live. I really don't want to leave it. I love my culture. But so many kids wanted to flee. When they went to college, some of them went to college abroad. Some of them went to college all the way out in California, Oregon, Washington. Some of them got their Arizona State. Some of them went to Texas to be Longhorns. You mean to tell me, no, the entire world didn't have segregation. The entire nation didn't have segregation. There were plenty of colleges. And you know why we know that? Because before segregation was even over with in the South, you literally had black scientists and stuff in the 1940s and 50s. Remember that couple? The couple of, they weren't real scientists. They were social scientists. The black people who did the doll study? They were literally black people who got into college and got a science, not a real science, but a science education. Science, quotes around it. I can't help myself. I apologize. So, you know, that's what I never understood either. You look at Thomas Sowell, Ben Carson, Herman Cain. Who's that David guy who's on Fox News and everybody thinks he's white all the time and he has to correct them. You see all these black people who have made it, and you say, if it's so systemically racist, then why do we see these black people who make it and they turn around and tell people, you know how I made it, is that I worked hard, just like everybody else. And then you have black people saying, well, no, but we can't do it because of systemic racism. Some colleges in the South were segregated, therefore we couldn't get into college. Are you kidding me right now? As many places as people go for college, it's rare, in fact, that I know of. I mean, this is anecdotal from my experience, so I'm not saying this is how it is. But it's rare that I know of that people go to college like right where they live, unless they're a legacy. Like you know, you're down in Mississippi, and your daddy went to Ole Miss, so you can go to Ole Miss, like Eli. But you can always be Peyton and say, nah, I'm going up Tennessee, blaze my own trail. That's three states up. Anybody in segregation, you go to college 3 states over, you're out of segregation. You're in college. There's nobody that you'd ever have to make excuses for. I mean, imagine you had a retarded dog. I don't mean retarded like I'm insulting someone, but a mentally challenged dog that just went right in the head and walked into stuff and started humping your friend's legs when they come over to the house. And you're like, excuse my dog, he don't know any better. You don't make excuses for that dog as much as white progressives make excuses for black people. Now, obviously, it was bad to have segregation, and obviously that was discrimination, and obviously that was racism. Slavery wasn't based on racism, but Jim Crow most certainly was based on racism. But to say that you're stuck there, that you can't go anywhere else, what did the man tell Arya when she went to the House of Black and White? A girl has everywhere else to go. You do. You got everywhere else to go. You say that people drew these red lines around these neighborhoods. Nobody forces you to live there. You know, that's what I've heard all my life when I brought up mountain poverty. Well, nobody forced y'all to live there. Well, you know, there's a lot of reasons that people live here and as poor as they are. It's because they like it. They're like the Amish, but don't get any respect like the Amish do. The Amish don't want your electricity. The Amish don't want your infrastructure. The Amish sees your city streets coming and sings Leonard Skinner to it. Lord, take me and mine before that comes. But and a lot of the mountain people are the same way. They don't care about the money and stuff like that. But the fact is that, yeah, it is like that. It's not just like that for black people. Black people, on the other hand, they care about the money. Black people are, every time they come around your city, bling bling. Pinky ring, what about 50, bling bling. I gotta get me a hoe who already got 3 kids with 4 baby daddy, bling bling. And I ain't gonna wear a rubber, oh, bling bling. That's how black people are. And that's a breeding strategy difference. I don't blame them for that. The nomadic hunter-gatherer breeding strategy in Africa had nothing to do with competency and can he take care of me, like the European breeding strategy. You know, the breeding strategy we hear about in the Western world about women are supposed to be seeking men who can provide for them and comfort them and care for them and rear their children. That's a European thing. I'm sorry to tell you, sorry not sorry, that's a European thing. The African nomadic hunter-gatherer breeding strategy was, do you have enough personal wealth in excess to gives me that now? No planning for the future. These weren't squirrels packing nuts against a tough winter, because there was no tough winter. There was no tough winter in sub-Saharan Africa. That's what you got to understand. They were never sedentary people. There were no tornadoes. There were no hurricanes. There was no tough winter season blizzards. There wasn't any of that in sub-Saharan Africa. Even during the Ice Age, it was spared. The sub-Saharan region. So they were just always on the go, always on the go. So they had no long-term planning. You know, why do you think that some civilizations created the concept of daylight savings time and to go to bed early and get up early and work and strive and build your aqueducts and build your cathedrals and build your roads and build your wheels and build your wagons and grow your crops and tend your cattle and do this animal husbandry and get your food on, and some people didn't. It's the breeding strategy was entirely different, and when you get a different breeding strategy like that, you're getting people who spend money on different things, who focus on different things, and that's just life. So white people, they don't have no coalition. You don't hear from them banging the doors down. Yeah, they'll line up in front of food banks if they're starving, but they ain't going to the news cameras and saying, you know, this rich supremacy is holding me down, like black people do. And not all black people, obviously, but, you know, the victim cult. The victim cult of black people do that.
Grandparents, on the other hand, got a low-interest loan to buy their first house and got accepted into a handful of top universities, which traditionally only accepted white students. This opened up a wealth of opportunities that they were able to pass on to their kids. And
this is what bugs me about it. Again, if you're telling the truth about something, you don't have to lie about something. If I tell you that evolution is true and say that, you know, you just had a Steven Seagal coma all your life, yet somehow grew up and could still walk and stuff, or you know, you like you're a creationist religious person and you don't believe in evolution, and I wanted to tell you evolution was true, well, I would point you to genetic mapping and the fossil record and paleontology and even archaeology and then evolutionary biology, and then even fields like chemistry and genetics, and to show you, you know, the hell, even the chemical bonds of the DNA that are made up of molecules that are groups of atoms electrically, chemically bonded to create, the double helix, and how that we can trace that back to having evolved from RNA. I wouldn't have to throw a lie in there. Like, oh yeah, and then one day an alien came down, like my girlfriend believes, an alien came down and combined people's DNA. Yeah, or like, George Salaklis, whatever his name is. I'm not saying it's aliens, but aliens. If something's true, you don't have to throw a lie into it. Look, this is literally a lie. That every white person was wealthy. Every white person could send their kids to good universities. If you were white, bada boom, bada bing, you had it made. It objectively wasn't like that in the past, because the advent of mountain hollers to begin with, people only occupy these little cutout valleys and mountains that don't have anything worth a damn in them, because they were run up into the hills during slavery when they were poor and starving and couldn't get jobs, because why would someone pay them a wage when they were slaves? Now you would figure, say I'm racist. Say I'm a horrible, horrible, horrible racist, and I just hate black people. Because according to black people, they're the only race. It's just black people and white people. And that's a whole nother topic we'll do, about how it's a black supremacy play, not a white supremacy play. But anyways, just say I was a horribly racist person, and I needed somebody to work out back for me to build a shed. Would I literally let black people do it? Wouldn't I think they're inferior and would do a bad job at it? Or would I just go ahead and throw a couple bucks to my own people? My own people whom I loved. My own people who I supposedly want to achieve success, right? I want to see them breed more, and I want to see them do better. But no, I'm going to let them starve to death and potentially die while I get black people to do it for free, even though I hate black people. There's no logic in any of this. That's how hollers were created, because you didn't have opportunity just because you were white, like this video is making it seem. It's a lie that's bordering, to me, on hate speech. We see already how many white people are randomly attacked today by black people who get fed up at this kind of stuff, and because they believe it, they don't know any better. Most white people who watch this crap don't know any better. If it's on TV, it must be true, right? I read it on a t-shirt. It can't be lying.
Grandkids. Even as late as the 1980s, an investigation into the Atlanta real estate market showed that banks were more willing to lend to low-income white families than to middle or upper-income African-American families.
But is that it? You didn't tell us you didn't tell us the methodology of the study. You didn't tell us exactly what the study found. You just told us the outcome. And we're to believe the outcome. Now, I'm just saying, if something's true, why, literally, again, I'm not gonna bear repeating on saying that, because y'all know what I'm talking about here. That if something is true, why can't you just tell us the true version of it? Why can't you, instead of showing these corny ass pictures on the screen of all the white people and all the black people, why can't you show us on the screen their exact findings?
As a result, today, for every $100 of wealth held by a white family, black families have $5.04. In 2007,
but that's got nothing at all, I guess, to do with the fact that per capita, black people are the number one spending demographic on material goods. You can't have, when you buy depreciable items, you don't have net worth from them. Like if you have money, if you gave a white person $100,000 and a black person $100,000, the black person bought a house with their $100,000. The white person bought Air Jordans for everybody in their family, including the 3 new babies that Shaniqua, Tamika, and Tanisha just had. And then the white person bought an iPhone for everybody, and the white person bought big screen TVs for every room in their government provided house, because they didn't buy a house with their money. And then the white person went out and bought a fat whip with 20-inch rims, and then a bling bling watch to wear, a Rolex, because they got to style with the Rolex. and they got to buy the gaming consoles. They got to have the PlayStation, the Xbox, and the Wii. Because you got to have a bar and a pool table to have all your homies over. Everybody's seen MTV Cribs. Let's be real about it here. Let's just be real about it. Now, you come back in 5 years and you see who's got more wealth. Well, the black man's got equity because he spent his money on the house. So he's got net worth. The white person who bought it on depreciable assets, he's in debt. He doesn't have anything. He's in debt now. He's parking his car 3 blocks away so the repo man don't come for it. Because them phones ain't worth nothing. They don't got resale value. Them big screen TVs that he broke when the Lakers lost in the NBA Finals, they ain't worth nothing. Them gaming consoles have done been used and abused because he's done played every Madden game since 1997. You know, stupid white person. This is what we would say. What we would say. We would say, stupid white person. You stupid ass white people, stop spending your money on depreciable assets. If you stupid ass white people would just invest your money into things that actually appreciated in value, or at least gave you equity commensurate to their value, then you wouldn't be in the situation you are now, crying that you don't have anything. You stupid white people. So, I mean, come on now. Let's build some rockets here, people, with this complicated stuff. These equations of quantum physics we're doing here. Why is it different when we reverse the races? When we see what they buy compared to what white people buy, what they invest in compared to what white people invest in. Yet we can't say anything like that. You'd be run out of town on a rail as a racist. You have to agree with these progressive assholes or else you ain't allowed to talk.
2017 study confirms that redlining is still affecting home values in major cities like Chicago today. This explains how Kevin and Jamal inherited vastly different circumstances.
I don't want to hear about inherited circumstances when you're talking about Chicago. Do you know what Kevin inherited that Jamal probably didn't? A daddy. Jamal is literally I got synesthesia, so it's hard for me to do the math in reverse. I apologize. I think 6 times more likely to not have a father than, don't quote me on that, because all I see right now are green and blue blobs in my head. I can't see the numbers. Some days my synesthesia acts up worse than others. I think it's something like 5 point something, 6 times more likely not to have a father than Kevin is. So notice they never factor that into the equation. There's 2 stacks of money here and 1 stack of money here. Well, how do we know that daddy didn't make this one and mommy made this one? And then you got mommy over here only making this one because she only works part-time because she's trying to raise a kid alone. They don't even attempt to factor that in here. Maybe they get to that later in the video. But I don't want to hear about it. Because you can redline people all you want. You can keep them from getting home loans all you want. That does not make them put guns in their hand and get out and start shooting shit up. Remember, redlining, they separate it from gerrymandering. To them, redlining is mortgage lenders not wanting to lend them money. Grocery stores not wanting to sit up in the area. Businesses not wanting to sit up in the area. And you say that's black? Look, man, look. Forget the Appalachia for a minute and that they do the exact same thing. Let's say you got someplace like, y'all remember Banging in Little Rock? White people thinking they're gangsters. It's a show that come on. There's a lot of black people too, but it was a whole lot of white people stacking gang signs in the kitchen, burning themselves with clothes hangers because they're literal morons. Whole bunch of white people. It come on to HBO in the 90s. There's a lot of gun crime, a lot of thuggery there from white people. Dumbass, moronic white people. You know, you had that kind of environment. Banks don't want to lend to people in that environment. Why would banks lend you money, even if you had good credit, to buy a house in that environment that risks getting burned down or broke into or having the windows busted out and depreciating in value? The neighborhood around it's going to depreciate in value. The bank's making a bad investment there. Look, Why don't y'all ever do a test case? Raise your children right and don't allow them to become gangbangers. And then if government's still doing this to y'all, then you got a case. But when you literally exist in an open air drug market and your children become gangbangers, remember the week George Floyd was killed by the police? 50 people were shot. I forget how many died, but 50 people were shot in Chicago that weekend. I read it on a YouTube comment and didn't believe it. I said, no, that's too high for a weekend. And went and looked it up, and it was in like 19 different local papers. Of course, mainstream media wasn't carrying it. 19. What did I say? 19. I meant to say like 9. Could be 19. Yeah, it was like 9 results I got on my Bing scrolling down, all from local sources, the Chicago Tribunes and shit like that. You know, the Windy City Wednesday, dumb shit like that. Wasn't MSNBC and CNN. They don't bother with it.
Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. A big part of systemic racism is implicit.
I might skip over this because implicit bias. I mean, Ben Shapiro, for as spastic as he is sometimes, he explained this pretty well. That is like fighting a ghost. I explained it at the onset of this video that it's a God of the gaps argument for them. They push it back. They can't find any outward bias of which to accuse white people. So first they created, I remember back in the 90s, they created what was called coded racism. Well, that didn't take off because people weren't buying it. It didn't sound intelligent enough. That you had real racists out there. Real racists who really, really, really hated black people. Because remember, only black people exist as minorities. Nobody else exists because it's a black supremacy movement, not a white supremacy movement. They were really, really racist, but just weren't showing you the racism. They were coding it, is what it was. They were burning crosses on your lawn in their mind, just not on your lawn. So we knew the whole time that they stayed right. Now it's this implicit bias that literally this is how you know it's nonsense. It literally states implicit bias that only white people and only white people have tribal instincts that make them prefer their own people without even knowing it. So basically, this is either them trying to push propaganda and trick black people into thinking they're oppressed, or it's a tacit admission that IQ differences are real and they're saying white people are smarter than black people. And black people don't have those tribal instincts, which we know is a lie too, because black people prefer black people, except when black people prefer black people, they say it's because my 400 years of oppression and on it goes, and that's why black people prefer black people, because they can rely upon black people. Oh, but it doesn't have anything to do with the 200,000 years that y'all have been living together as a race, right? No, nothing to do with that. And white people's implicit bias couldn't have anything to do with the 10, 11, 12,000 years that we all evolved together as a race, right? Nah. What's a few thousand fucking generations compared to white people's hatred? Am I right?
Bias. These are prejudices in society that people are not aware that they have. Let's go back to Kevin and Jamal. Against all...
Oh, that was quick. No citation, no explanation. Just presented it as fact. That's how you know it's nonsense. It's a God of the gaps argument. We're going to push it back to this nebulous concept that we cooked up in some Marxist classroom and just tell everybody it's true.
All odds, Jamal manages to be the only student from his high school to get accepted into a great university. The same one that Kevin and his high school friends are attending.
Look, every single white person made it. This is disgusting. Every single white person made it. Only one black person made it. Every single white person. That's how much money they got, I guess, to pay for all those kids' education at an elite university. And they're living that close to black people? The fuck are you kidding me? These white people are rich. They can send all 4 of their kids to the most elite university in America at the same time. paying their tuition. And they're going to live that close to black people, that close to the ghetto.
But after Kevin and Jamal both graduate, Jamal notices that his resume isn't drawing as much interest as Kevin's.
You know, I wondered why. I hadn't watched this before. I wondered why they did this. I wondered why they called the black person Jamal and the white person Kevin. I wrote a book called The Genetic Roots of Culture. And to me, I think having black sounding and white sounding names, I think this is mythical. So I named the characters in my book Tim and Tom. Tim and Tom. Tim and Tom. O-I is the only difference in those names. O-I. O-I. I've known people of all races. I knew an Asian guy named Tommy. Tim and Tom. But I'm going to tell you why they started out calling the white guy Kevin and the black guy Jamal, because now he's about to say that black sounding quote-unquote names don't get called back as much as Kevin. But see, this is how, again, if something's true, you don't need to lie to people. But this is how they front-loaded that study. When they did that study, they used names like Bianca and Alexandra, and then used names like LaTaquisha and LaToya. Yeah, names carry connotations. But do you know how you test to make sure that they're just discriminating against black people and not people with names that they think are funny sounding? You put Denny Ray in there. You put Bo Cephas in there. You put Bubba in there. You put Billy Bob in there. You put Peggy Sue and Betty Lou and Tara Ann. All these redneck names. All these white trash hillbilly names. No. Y'all know yourselves that names carry connotation. That's why you know Kevin. Kevin has the sound. Kevin has a white sound to it, where Jamal has a black sound to it. But Kevin's white sound to it is Kevin sounds like Kevin comes from a good upscale neighborhood. Well, where does Cletus sound like he comes from? Why didn't you call him Cletus? You know why you didn't call him? You know why you didn't call him Cletus, you progressive scumbag? The reason you didn't call him Cletus is because nobody would believe you. They would hear the name Cletus and say, "Pa, Cletus comes from the bayou. Cletus is down there banging his sister. Cletus is inbred. Cletus ain't got but the one tooth left, and he's got to put that in before dinner." It's what they would say. You know names carry connotations. And you know they're not necessarily racial connotations. They're just negative connotations, and all races have them.
Even though they graduated from the same program with the exact same GPA.
Plus, they never show you this. I've looked for this study for like 2 years. I really did. I looked for this study for 2 years to see if I could see side-by-side application comparisons. You have to take their word that the applications were the same. I'll say again, if you're telling the truth, you don't have to lie about it. If you're telling the truth about the applications being the same and the black people being discriminated against more, why aren't you showing us the applications? Why aren't you showing us all the businesses that you called so we can check if they have a black owner or a white owner? Because for all we know, it could be a black man named Michael who grew up in the ghetto and got away from the ghetto and doesn't want to mess with people named Jamal because he has a negative connotation. There are so many ways that this isn't science. Oh, let me count the ways. Off the top of my head, I'm not even going to get into it. I've done taken up too much of y'all's time.
Fortunately for Jamal, studies show that resumes with white-sounding names get twice as many callbacks as
What'd I tell you?
identical resumes with black sound.
They're not identical resumes. They're not identical. If they were identical, you would show them to us. Y'all never show them to us. Why, instead of showing this graph, is he not putting the resumes side by side on the screen? You know why? Because it's a hoax.
Names. Implicit bias is one of the reasons why the black unemployment rate is twice the rate of white unemployment, even among...
Okay. Like all things, I'm willing to concede, if you put this through scientific rigor, that this could be true and this could be a thing on which we could work. I'm willing to concede that, because I am scientific minded. At least I try to be. I have my gree like everybody else. I don't put myself up there. I'm no Roberto Einstein that's going to solve gravity, whatever the hell them mathematicians did. I'm not a mathematician, theoretical physicist. I don't dabble in that. I try to be scientific minded. Why don't they control for variables like the 42% of black people who live in Section 8 housing and draw in over the equivalent of over $32,000 a year in welfare payments once you factor in their rent, their utility assistance, their SNAP benefits, their monetary payments each month, etc. They make the equivalent of over $32,000. Why don't you factor in the black people who don't want to work? When you do unemployment numbers in the black community, they do them different than numbers in the white community. And Obama is proof of this. You can see Obama's unemployment numbers started getting so bad that they changed the metrics. They said if people aren't looking for work, we're not going to count them anymore. Where do you think they get that kind of thing from? That they can just change it either way that they want. They get it from right here. They cheat and game this number as much as they can. Why don't they poll people who want a job versus don't want a job? If you went knocking on ghetto doors, well, no, let's not even make it about black people. If you went knocking on Amish doors, because Amish are like 98% unemployed as a community. Seriously, where do they work? At bowling alleys with Woody Harrelson? Where are the Amish working? If you went knocking on their doors and asked them, do you want to work? No. Okay, I'm not going to include your number on the unemployment numbers because you don't want to work. Black people, they assume that they all want to work. So they look at the people of working age who are unemployed. That's a cheap, cheesy lie. Again, I'll say it for like the 18 billionth time here. If something's true, you don't have to lie about it. You don't have to tell a lie at any part in your explanation from A to B. Getting there, you can get there. You can cut the truth with the straightest line, and you don't have to veer off into Lieville like they do. And on our left, this is misleading overlook. Come on, man. Why don't you go when you do these studies and ask black people how many of them don't want to work? Or y'all do so much sociology trying to get into the minds of white people to see if they got implicit bias and implicit racism. Why don't you start talking to black people about, hey, would you rather wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, drive an hour to work for $14 an hour, so about $500 a week, then you have to spend every penny that you make on rent, on your food, on utilities, on your insurance? Or would you rather continue the government pay your rent, your food, your utilities, and your insurance, and then you get your monetary payments every month? They present this like every black person wants to work. I guess they do that because they don't want the welfare queen to be a stereotype that sticks, but every race has them. The most disgusting video I ever seen in my life of someone abusing welfare was a white woman. She's getting like $1,200 a month in cash, waving that money around in her hands, $800 a month in SNAP benefits, and she's going to the store and getting lobster and feeding it to her dog. That's the most disgusting. The second most disgusting abuse was some surfer dude they had on Bill O'Reilly. Who did the same thing, refused to work but just got food stamps and got public housing out in California, because California gives it to everybody, I reckon. Well, probably California has preference for illegals, but that's another video. And he was doing the same thing, buying lobster and shrimp and steak and eating like a king when everybody else is working and eating ramen noodles. So I'm not even going to be the one to sit here and say that black people are the only ones abusing welfare, because they're not. But this statistic assumes that every black person wants to work and just can't get a job. And why? Well, they set the stage preemptively with that misleading crap about the black sounding names.
College graduates today. You can see evidence of systemic racism in every area
Where?
of life. The
Where? Where is evidence of systemic racism? Because I haven't seen not one shred of evidence of systemic racism.
disparities in family wealth, incarceration rate.
Well, I noticed he didn't get into a big spiel about incarceration rates. Because not like they would show the crime statistics anyways, they would omit them. But if he got into it more, I bet you'd have more people asking about, well, what are the crime rates then? And see, the thing is, again, like I'm saying, like I'm going to say it again, if you're telling the truth, you don't have to lie. If it was true that you could say, more black people are in prison, okay, let's follow that back. More black people commit more crime, okay, let's follow that back. More black people are poor, okay, let's follow that back. More black people, since more black people are in poverty, and poverty causes crime, and you could go around and around and around with it and say, cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. The reason they don't is that because when they get back to the very beginning, when they get back to the very beginning here, they know they can't do this. They're stupid, but they're not idiots, is what I'm saying. When you get back to the very start of life and wealth, the Appalachia is one of the most peaceful regions in the country. I showed a statistic on Twitter. Battle Beagle retweeted it for me, and I ended up getting like 1,100 likes on it, which was, on that count, an all-time record for me. So I was chest out for about 5 minutes till I got banned again. I got banned for the hate speech, saying I posted a stat that said in all the Appalachia, the whole entire Appalachia region, I think it was 2016 to 17 or 17 to 18. There were zero recorded rapes and 2 murders. And then I put a picture beside it. 1 black majority neighborhood in Maryland. 1 black majority neighborhood in Maryland in the same year. Like 370 rapes, averaging 1 point something a day. And like something like 200 murders. And I found them through like 25 minutes of research because they had identical income numbers. They were both so poor and indigent. So that's why they don't talk about this stuff in detail, because they can't do scientific methodology with it. All they can do is propaganda with it.
Political representation and education are
black people have no political representation. I guess the Congressional Caucus of Caucasians. I mean, caucus and Caucasian, they're similar words, right? So it's not like we have the Congressional Black Caucus. They're Congressional Caucasian Caucus. And it's not like black women are the #1 demographic in colleges or anything like that. No.
all examples of systemic racism. Unfortunately, the biggest challenge with systemic racism is that there's no single person or entity responsible for it, which makes...
But that doesn't make any sense. If you had systemic serial killing going on, and you said that there's no individuals or entities responsible for it, then you'd be like, well, then who's killing them? A god? Zeus with his lightning bolt? That thing M. Night Shyamalan had in The Happening? What's killing them then? No. See, this is what I'm talking about. They can't do cause and effect. It's not in the purview. I don't mean to go off on another aside here and make this last all night. But social sciences like sociology is the mother of social theory. Sociology gave birth to all of these social theories. Critical race theory and gender studies and African American studies. Sociology gave birth to it. Sociology, after Enlightenment in the late 18th century, like in the 1780s, was a positivist empiricist enterprise. It was an inductive enterprise, like natural sciences are an inductive enterprise. You deduce, but the methodology itself is inductive. The disciplines themselves, the enterprise itself is inductive. Until Karl Marx. I'm not even lying about that. I mean, y'all can look it up. Google it! Google it! Jink, Google it. Of course. Karl Marx postulated that if something were for the betterment of society, it did not need to be factual to count as science. That is no bullshit. Part of Marxism is that if you feel, I mean, I'm paraphrasing here this part because we live in the age of feels over reals, and they all draw from Marxism. So I'm extrapolating here to work a little flux capacitor with a little bit. Forgive my artistic license with this, but if you feel that something is for the betterment of society, you don't have to prove it's real. You just have to say it's real. And he created the post-positivist, non-empiricist branch of social sciences that do all of this. They do all of this. So they're incapable of drawing cause and effect. So I'm serious. Let's go back a little bit. They cannot even correlate, much less find a causal factor for anything. They can't even find a correlative factor. There's nothing correlative here with white people. All of these problems are correlative only with black people. Causal only by black people.
Systemic racism is that there's no single person or entity responsible for it.
See, no single person or entity. You only reach that conclusion that there can be no cause for the effect if you don't do scientific methodology, if you exist in this feels over reals type of reality. When would you ever hear a science say? When would you ever hear a Thomas Edison say, the light bulb is the light bulb? There's no single electrical or chemical process that causes the light. There's no physical law by which this light abides. It just is. There's no cause, there's just an effect. What makes me the angriest? There's always hucksters. There always are hucksters and scammers and snake oil salesmen and hand rubbers out there. There's a guy probably, it's Sunday, right? So as I speak, there's probably a guy in Texas taking people's money in a big tent revival, telling them that he can heal them by touching them. So it's not that people do this that bugs me the most. It's that people so easily believe it. This is a true story, and I'm so damn proud that I've taught my nephew so well. My nephew, who's 6 years old, he come in there and got me today. Uncle Brian, I want to watch them ghost videos on YouTube. So I said, all right. So we went into the room where the big TV's at, hanging on the wall. He was watching some Sonic the Hedgehog, but he said he wants to watch some ghost videos. And we watched a ghost video. This guy's standing at the top of the steps, and he sees a black shadow walking down there. And I said, what do you think of that ghost, buddy? He said, I would punch it. I said, no, you can't punch it because your hand will go through ghost. He said, well, wait a minute. And he stood up, and I said, what is he doing? He walked up to the wall where the TV was saying. He said, I have to get a closer look. And he looked and said, I see this. You see his legs and you see his shoes? I said, yeah, buddy. Well, that's a guy. This isn't a real ghost. He is pranking me. I said, yep, you're on it. A 6-year-old. Why the fuck can't a 26-year-old figure this shit out? You mean to tell me there ain't no racial differences? Fuck.
Which makes it very hard to solve. So what can you do? The first thing you can do is work towards becoming more aware of your own implicit biases. What are some prejudices?
Look at this. White people smell like dogs. White people are... where's the bubble that says all white people are racist? Poor Muslims. Poor Asians who account for the vast majority per capita of traffic accidents. Black people who objectively are the vast majority of people in sports. Americans who are per capita fatter than everybody else. Jews who are stingy with money. Jews stingy as hell with money. Jews rubbing them nickels together. You'd be like, let me see a nickel. I'll give it right back. Void vague. Goyim. Is that negative? Is that saying we want to jazz the goose? No. Stereotypes are stereotypes because they have utility, because they're true. By and large, for for an aggregation of people, for a mean of people, stereotypes are true. Does that mean every single person? No. How come we have to work on our understandings, but the people who preach this nonsense don't have to work on their understanding? This is a guy who's literally saying there is no cause for the effect. There is no cause. What did I tell y'all at the onset? And I hadn't even watched this yet. I told y'all at the onset it's God of the gaps. They push back to something nebulous that can't be explained. They can't even explain it. They find areas of life where there is inequity. And they say, because of this outcome, we're not going to study it. We're not going to look into it. Because of this outcome, therefore white people were bad.
That you might hold that you're not aware of. Second, let's acknowledge that the consequences of slavery and Jim Crow laws are still affecting access to opportunity.
But why is this affecting access for blacks in the aggregate? If they wanted to make the argument that it's affecting blacks in the South, I would be more inclined to listen. I would be. I honestly would be. I honestly would be. I would be a lot more inclined to listen if these arguments. But you know, these arguments where most black people live is out west in California and up north and in big metropolitan cities that have nothing to do with the South. Is where you're going to find most black people who are the poorest and crying about systemic racism. Where do you see the black riots and stuff happening? They're typically, generally speaking, I mean, some of them happened down in Georgia because them two dudes who tried to citizens arrest, and then the guy tried to steal his gun, and now they're going to be in with James Fields as political prisoners, but that's another video. But generally speaking, you see all of these problems in big metropolitan areas up north where they never had slavery. They never had segregation. They never had Jim Crow. Redlining, the redlining they're talking about in those contexts is a myth. It's more about gerrymandering than redlining because they wanted the black vote. They don't want to deprive black people. They want to be black people's daddy that they never had so that black people will constantly vote for them.
Today. As a result, we should support systemic changes that create more equal opportunity.
How do you get systemic changes when you just literally fucking said that you don't find a systemic cause? You literally just said 2 minutes ago that there is no systemic cause for this. So what are you going to change? Hey, my engine's making a noise and I don't know what it is, but I'm going to go fix it. We know exactly what they mean by that analogy I just used. Dismantle the entire system and turn it Marxist, and then everybody will be happy. Because that's what this is. Marxist propaganda. Marxists figured that America has been so anti-communist for so long that they're not just going to be able to preach the godliness of Marx and have us all join, so they turn it into a race war to get their Marxism in. That's what these riots are all about. When they first started and were only in black cities, yeah, it was black people beating the shit out of 72-year-old Korean store owners in their own cities. But then when they got in cities where Antifa whites weren't scared of joining in, little white and Jewish communists, then that's when they started trying to bring about the Marxist revolution. That's all this stuff is. You cannot sit here and within 2 minutes shit the bed that hard to say that this effect has no cause. Oh, and by the way, now we have to get to the root cause and fix it.
For everyone, increasing public school funding and
look, predatory lending. Before it was no lending, now it's predatory lending. I guess midway through the video he remembered. Oh, that's right. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, or maybe the other way around, Freddie Mae and Fannie Mac, I don't know, were created pretty much basically to literally give black people loans. And it destroyed our entire economy almost at a global level because they couldn't repay them. And that wasn't all their fault. It was predatory lending, and I agree you got to do away with predatory lending. Predatory lending affects everybody, but world ends black people most affected.
Making it independent from property taxes would be a great start, so that poor...
Oh, I missed that part. Oh, he wants the feds to fund all the schools instead of property taxes. That's not to lift black schools up. That's to tear white schools down. Because that's what they really want. That's what Marxism is. Capitalism is uplifting from the bottom up. Marxism is collapsing from the top down. So he wants white schools to fail, not black schools to achieve. Oh, I see where your head's at.
And wealthy districts can receive equal access to resources. Systemic problems.
I'm sick of hearing about these resources when literally 50 kids in a hut without clean drinking water are using a fucking abacus and setting the world on fire. Coming here and taking all the tech jobs. They didn't have an iPad. They didn't have an apple a day to give their teacher or healthy lunches to eat or anything like that. They showed up in some ripped up khaki colored shorts with their triangle Vietnamese fucking straw hats on and just sat there and studied because it's part of their culture.
Problems require systemic solutions. Luckily, we're all part of the system, which means that we all have a role to play in making it better.
I'm not a part of your system. I'd like to take this and throw it on the ground.
Peace.
Written, produced, and animated by Alex Kikua. Austin, Texas. He's got a twatter. Welcome, Netflix addict. Senior video producer, motion designer at... Oh, I reckon this is the place that made it. Progressive, action-oriented digital media. You can't stop a movement. Black Lives Matter. Look at this shit. Black Panther out there. You know, this is another thing. And I noticed this. Drew Brees, quarterback for the New Orleans Saints, said that he didn't agree with Colin Kaepernick disrespecting the flag. And you got all these black sports announcers calling him ignorant and saying that he ain't educated. Well, you know, educated, that's a weird thing to say by people who are supposedly oppressed, who are literally saying, we want to oppress you into believing like we believe. Because what they say when they're saying you're not educated is that you don't believe how I believe. If only you would read and believe in the Bible, then you would believe in God like me. That's what that is. And they're willing to oppress you for it. But you know, like I said about the truth, if you're telling the truth, you don't have to tell a lie in there. A lie by omission is saying that George Floyd is something that only happens to black people. Joseph Sheldon Hutcherson was his name, a white man who was killed in more brutal fashion than George Floyd, and not a media outlet run it in the mainstream, not one. The NYPD's budget is $6 billion. That's more than the city spends on health, homelessness, youth development, and workforce development combined. Well, sorry, comrade. But somebody's got to keep the city in check, because if you didn't have police, then your diversity, it would be your greatest strength, that's for sure. It'd be the greatest strength in tearing the city down, because the people who built that city are a minority in that city. Honestly. Because it wasn't the diversity who built the skyscrapers and started Wall Street. Black Wall Street. Oh, I hate hearing about Black Wall Street too, man. Yeah, it's messed up what they did to them. And I think 1921, I want to say, 1921, it was down there in Oklahoma, somewhere off Tulsa. It was a freedman's town that they say was built by slaves, but they weren't really built by slaves. It was infrastructure that white people created. Then black people would nail some boards together and create a school and stuff. But it was pretty much where emancipated slaves went. Okay, cool. They copied the principles of the economic principles of white people because they weren't getting welfare and did their own thing. Damn right, buddy. That's what you do. My hat's off to them. And it is really messed up that the Democrats went in there and burned it down and killed all them people. But to not do it again in 100 years because you're dependent on welfare now, fuck, what's your excuse? Japan got hit with 2 A-bombs. H-bombs. Hydrogen, atoms, whatever. I'm not a physicist. Yeah, well, that's all I got for y'all tonight. I appreciate you watching. I just wanted to talk about this. I was told that it was the definitive proof of systemic racism. That's what I was told. This guy got to the end of his video and said, the effect doesn't have a cause, but here's how we can fix it. There's nothing you can do for stuff like that. It's insanity. Anyways, I thank y'all very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I didn't have a lot of people in here. I don't stream enough probably to build up a big following. I'll probably be on with Halsey in a couple nights. I really want to get on with him when he does Jared Taylor, but he probably won't let me on because Halsey's got like a fanboy boner over there. Halsey will probably take a Viagra and stay off camera, and you'll hear some during the stream where he's getting a little busy over Jared Taylor, because Halsey's the most Jewish white nationalist you'll ever meet in your life. It's crazy. Anyways, thank y'all for showing up. I'm gonna dip